All right, everybody, so we're going to talk about a movie that's a cult following now. It wasn't really well received at the time. I'll talk about two reasons why it probably didn't really get a lot of success. And now it's a kind of a cult thing. I'll get into it a little bit later. I do like the film, of course. It's 1998. It's got Bill Pullman. It's a breakout movie for Ben Stiller. And it's murder mystery, private detectives. Of course I'm going to love it. It's Zero Fact.
Yeah, I saw this movie and I was like, yeah, of course Nick would pick this movie. I'm not going to tell you if that's a slight or not. We'll hear about it in my review. Join us in just a few seconds. Welcome back to the show, everyone. I'm one of your hosts, Kyle Goethe from GoatFilmReviews.com.
I'm Nick from the St. Paul Filmcast. Thanks for finding us. Thanks for watching. And for our loyal fans, thank you for continuing to support the show. Hey, you can follow the show on Twitter and on Instagram. Shoot us questions over there, too. We might answer them on the show. Both Kyle and I are members of the Minnesota Film Critics Alliance. It's been too cold here for a long time. Check out that webpage for critics we use as well as ours. We do have a Patreon. Check that out for some great deals that tell us what movies we should review in the future and get some great other content that we put up there as well. And today we're going to talk about a movie that came out in March 1998. It's 30 years old, The Zero Fact.
Yeah, so brilliant and eccentric detective Daryl Zero, with the help of his associate Steve Arlo, is set to uncover the mystery behind a missing set of keys and a blackmail scheme targeting a business tycoon with more than a few secrets of his own.
Okay, so there was a fashion kind of in the late 90s of this neuronic detective kind of a thing. After Zero Fact, you got TV shows like Monk, Psych, where these very neuronic consulting detectives kind of spawned that thing as well. It actually kind of probably inspired a lot more TV than film.
Including its own pilot for a series that almost happened, but the network didn't pick it up.
Almost had Alan Cummings playing.
Yeah, it would have been
Pullman.
a prequel about his younger years getting to know Steve.
Right,
So
Ben Stiller, Steve.
Yeah.
So right, the people that did this, because we'll get to later, the cinematographer is Bill Pope for this, but also did a pilot for Freaks and Geeks, and Jake Kasdan and Bill Pope did the pilot for Freaks and Geeks, and that did get picked up, that TV show. If I haven't seen Freaks and Geeks, I love that
Freaks
shit.
and Geeks, yeah.
And then Bill Pope also did the pilot for, I think it was Preacher with Seth Rogen.
Oh, really? Okay. I've seen Preacher. I just didn't know he did that. But
Did the pilot.
Oh, it's
yeah,
a great show. Yeah.
That's the way to get your pilot picked up. Get Bill Pope to do the cinematography.
I mean, it certainly didn't hurt The Matrix as a franchise. So.
So one of the things it's a lot of legs for something that didn't get a lot of success at the time. Two reasons. One, you have a story that's kind of sold as all about Bill Pullman. It's really not. I mean, the cover is. And number two, you're gonna use something called Zero during the stage of rental. That's going to be in the back of the store.
I didn't think about that, but you're probably
And this is
right.
one of the things I tried to tell people to rent this movie. But when people go to the video store in the 90s, you start at the A's and you go all the way down. By the time you get to the T's, you probably figure out what movie you wanted.
Yeah. And the
And then
unfortunate thing is the Z is not only at the very far back, it's at the bottom and right next to the outlets and the rat traps.
So by the time it's going to get ignored rental, it's going to get ignored probably going out to see it in a theater. It's almost like what we talked about with the David Duchovny movie, the Payoff movie.
Okay.
Right. Because it's very much for television, not for film.
Yeah, and when you have Jake Kasdan, who's the son of famous Lawrence Kasdan, who we covered with Body Heat before.
You got a Nepo baby.
Yeah,
right?
you kind of have that potentially loosey-goosey area right there. Of course, Kasdan had spent time on film sets. He actually met Bill Pullman while his dad was making The Accidental Tourist, and he wrote the role of Daryl Zero for Bill Pullman, with the intention that I've got to get Bill to play this role, and I think that's a good idea for that.
I agree.
But then you also have Kasdan, who I think it's tough when your dad is a very, very famous screenwriter.
Lawrence Kasdan, yeah,
and
Body Heat
then
and all that, yeah.
Beyond that, just a pretty solid director as well. Not all of them are hits, but he's done some really good work. To follow a guy who is responsible for working on Indiana Jones and Star Wars and all these big things, as well as just films like Body Heat, had to have been tough to do. So I think it was a smart idea for him to take a previously existing idea, i.e. Sherlock Holmes is actually based on a scandal in Bohemia.
Right.
which is a famous Sherlock Holmes story. And you can, when you see it, it's kind of like shatters that glass where it's like, oh yeah, okay, it's a Sherlock Holmes tale. Just, you know, we've kind of flipped the script on the characters.
And he's very neurotic. It's the selling point. Of course, Bill Pullman. This is after Independence Day.
Yeah.
And he's kind of, you give him range. Just let him do it. Get out there. And I think he's a little more constricted when he did The President in Independence Day. And I'm sure he loved to read the script where you could just be out there. Just go ahead and go. Wear a Hawaiian shirt. I don't care. Munch on cold cereal.
What's funny is that in Independence Day, you know, they call him like the young president, like the child president, because he's such a young guy in that film. And in this film, they're trying to make him seem even younger, but it's been like 4 years since Independence Day, and it's like, and I'm just having a lot of trouble selling him at that age. But you know, you've got him in that role. You've got early work from Ben Stiller, who at this point had kind of been doing some television sketch stuff. Had directed The Cable Guy. You know, kind of some of those smaller things that kind of kept him on the outside. You also have Kim Dickens,
which is just kind of discovered. She was discovered with this.
Yeah, I didn't see anything of hers before this. That much is for certain. I became aware of her on Lost, of course. She had a small role, but kept recurring.
I know her from
seasons.
Deadwood.
Deadwood, she's amazing in. Fear the Walking Dead, she's the reason to watch that show. She's excellent on that show. Yeah.
And so this is kind of sorry to interrupt, but kind of explain. This has legs for more of a television avenue than film.
Yeah. Because it seemed like, and even like what Angie Featherstone, who plays Jess, the girlfriend of Ben Stiller's character, I know her from most of her television appearances, like Jerry's maid in Seinfeld. Like everyone outside of our two leads, I know from television. And even at the time, Ben Stiller coming from television. You know, Ryan O'Neal is the only guy who I can't really have like a television connection with.
In the 90s, he's already made appeasements for his mistakes and his scandals and controversies and all that stuff. And this is kind of an opportunity to kind of come back into the mainstream of making films.
Yeah.
It didn't really pan out as what he thought in the late 90s.
Well, you kind of have a couple of choices when you've got scandals, and that's either to play the exact opposite or play a really scandal-ridden person.
And you got right, yeah, I didn't think about that. Right, yeah. All right. And so you're doing a movie. This is your first time. You've written it. It's inspired by Sherlock Holmes. And you can't really the copyright was already owned at the time still, Sherlock Holmes. But you want to do something like that. Yeah. And if you ever read A Scandal in Bohemia, it's all about the king of Bohemia is being blackmailed by a woman. And he's trying to use Sherlock Holmes' help, and he comes disguised, but Sherlock Holmes already know who he is. Yeah. And then throughout the story, Sherlock Holmes uses disguises, as well as Irene Adler uses disguises, as they trying to figure out who generally the right person is, and finally figure out all their nerves, and finally Sherlock Holmes understands that she's his equal. Yeah. And at the end, when everything gets resolved, the king's like, I'll pay you anything you want from a kingdom. What do you want? He's like, can I just have her picture? And so the only portrait picture of her ever known to exist, and Sherlock Holmes keeps it put on the fireplace. Pretty much that's the entire story, that he knows he met his rival. You don't really get that with this, but you understand, I think you understand with the theme of the book, with that short story, is everybody's kind of disguised. Yeah. Yeah.
And that's where this film feels like, and not to a detriment, it feels like a secondary draft and not a first draft, because a first draft would have taken all those elements and just left them on the table. Yeah. It feels like Kasdan got to the end of this draft and said, okay, what's this movie actually about? Besides being a Sherlock Holmesian story, what is the film about? And then he made some alterations to the narrative, things that would match this narrative as opposed to matching the Sherlock Holmes story. Yeah. Because when you do a recreation like that, and in this time period, I didn't see a ton of Sherlock Holmes kind of ones, but I saw a lot of Shakespeare things where people reinvented Shakespeare for the 90s. And,
you got Shakespeare in Love, and
you
got
things
Romeo
like
and Juliet,
and 10 Things I Hate About You, and like all these teen films that kind of like reinvented that idea. Right. And it's like when you don't know, it doesn't mean something, but when you know, when you're looking for it, then you find it, right? Yeah, or even kind of like a couple years later, we get Oh Brother Where Art Thou, which is the Odyssey, but very much not the Odyssey. No. So yeah, second draft work, which kind of reevaluates the whole story and pushes it down a new path.
Yeah. So up next is our review. Hopefully, after 30 years, I would have a different opinion about it, or what's our take. And this is his first review of this. Never seen it. Up next is our review of Zero Effect. It's very dangerous to put the word zero into movie, for the first time.
Especially for people rating it on a scale.
Rating on a scale. And then also when you're thinking about when you go to the video store, you don't want to use the last letter in the alphabet because people are not going to look for it. But overall, your first impression, I still kind of have a soft thing to this movie because it's a murder, kind of a murder mystery. It's Bill Pullman. But this is his first reaction to this movie.
So this, for me, it's ironic because this was actually on my watch list, and I just didn't realize what movie it was because I just love Jake Kasdan so much.
Okay.
This, for me, is, you know, you look at perfect films, you look at terrible films. This one, just a little bit above that halfway point.
Is it above Tuesday?
Yeah, it's above Tuesday.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
I'll say this right now. I like Zero Effect. Tuesday was okay. I don't dislike Tuesday, but it was just okay. Whereas this movie, I like Zero Effect. I think it hits more than it misses. I disagree with the idea that it's kind of like a complete, you know, jumbled mess. I think it does hit.
I think you had the same reaction to Robert Ebert because, like, I got invested into this far more than I thought I would.
Yeah, yeah. I think, you know, just from a marketing standpoint, there's a reason why this movie lost $4 million plus, and it's because it's a terrible poster. It's not a great title.
Right, I would not. You know, Daryl Zero is not a good name.
Yeah, I checked out one of the trailers. It's not a good trailer. Like, this movie did not do anything right to sell itself. But looking at it, you know, you're not going to lose me with Bill Pullman.
No.
I think he's fantastic in the role. I think it was right to pick him as your person because he plays a little against type. This is more in tune with his Spaceballs character than his Independence Day character, but not even really like Lone Star. It's kind of its own thing too.
No, and it's also the noir movie we talked about. It was the boyfriend and.
Oh shoot! Yeah. I can't remember that name.
Yeah. And he was in another movie, but from the 90s. But this is right. If you have Bill Pullman doing this, won't you have him like 90% of the movie?
Last Seduction. Sorry, go on.
But won't you have him like 90% of the movie? If you have a Sherlock Holmes, won't you have Sherlock Holmes 90% of the movie? Yeah, and
I think the idea always goes to focus on Watson because he's the more relatable character. But that's where I think this film does a big disservice. Is that I think this film does nothing for Ben Stiller to do.
Right.
He doesn't have anything to do. And it's a very Watson kind of story.
Look opposite of him.
Yeah.
Right? You always want to contrast Bill Pullman. You're going to have to, like, perfect suit, perfect everything, orderly.
Yeah. It's almost like Watson is always seen as kind of like the normal one of the two. You know, still almost as good as Sherlock, but Sherlock just has this kind of like something wasn't built right in Sherlock where he's able to use his mind in different ways. And Ben Stiller's character should have been the one who was kind of more of a partner, like the straight guy partner. But they choose to focus on the idea that, you know, Watson is in a relationship, which he was. Arlo is in a relationship, and he's trying to have a normal life. And the film does a disservice to him because it never gives Ben Stiller anything interesting to do. And as we've seen, especially in recent years, Ben Stiller is a pretty solid actor. He can do it, but he doesn't get much to do. And
also, I don't invest in what Kim Dickens' character, what is her talent to match Bill Pullman. Bill Pullman explains his character, Daryl, is very talented at it, even though it's wacky, and he takes the scenic route to solve the problem. Where you want him to do the straight line, he doesn't do it. He takes the scenic route. But what is Kim Dickens' character's talent to be so impressive and skillful?
Yeah.
And if characters talk about somebody being so talented, I still don't believe it. I want to see the talent.
Yeah.
Or the craftsmanship of you're fooling everybody, but I know you're fooling everybody, that you see in the book too.
Yeah, because we see a lot of Gloria, Kim Dickens' character, through the eyes of Daryl.
Yeah.
But the thing is, we're not watching a movie through his eyes. We are watching a omniscient story where we get to know a lot of characters outside of the fact. It's not just Daryl's story because we see a lot of the other characters outside of him. So like we don't need to only have his interpretation of her. We do need to give her some more of something to do.
Yes.
Build the character outside of the plot device.
Yeah.
And part of that too is I don't know that the revelations that are made involving the set of keys and the relationship to the blackmailer, I don't know that they really reconcile that in the narrative. They kind of just end up saying like, oh, the keys are such and the blackmailer is such. But then they just kind of start ignoring the other elements and they focus on the blackmailer. And it's like, I feel like they should have had more weight in the story, or they should have been more tidied up at the end.
I wanted something, if you haven't seen it yet, I wanted something at the end of like Dial M for Murder, where there's something with the keys and you're like, he explains it to you and you're like, oh my God, that is it.
Yeah.
I wanted something like that where there's a revelation to this that just kind of like, oh yeah, whatever. And then you get in the car and on to the next case or something like that.
Yeah, some parts of the narrative, and I think intentionally so, almost feel reminiscent of a newer film, Glass Onion, whereas like you have the main character, Daniel Craig's character says in that film, it's dumb, it's just dumb, and it's like, yeah, that's kind of part of the revelation of this, is that
It's dumb.
we put more importance into certain elements of the story than they actually have, which is, that's cool, that's a neat idea, but I don't think that Kasdan directs the closure to those elements.
And it's sold as a gritty detective 90s, supposed to be gritty slimy, and it's not it. It's sold as a comedy too. It's not it either. It's kind of a mesh of awkward, right? And it's a relationship tanglement. But there should have been a little. If I was the producer, I would like a little more comedy in it and a little more. You know, if we're going to put Daryl on the cover, my God, 90% of it has to be Daryl.
Well, not to mention the fact Bill Pullman being 2 years removed from Independence Day, why is his face not on more of those posters? It's always from like the neck down, and it's like, why are you not selling?
Because
the star of Independence Day.
Because the cover looks like there's this gritty, like movie 7 murder mystery to it.
Yeah,
and it's not
paint of taxi cab yellow. Like
it's
it just did not sell the movie that we were in for, and I think that if I had this film, I would first of all either give Steve more to do or start siphoning off the Ben Stiller character, because the film is close to 2 hours, and I think if you decided, you could chop about 10-15 minutes away from Ben Stiller and kind of tighten the film up a little bit more, because I don't think the B story with him works as well, and the film is removed enough from Sherlock Holmes that you don't need a Watson as much, so like just kind of give him less. I'm sorry to say, give him less to do.
With Stiller, it's less is more. Less is with Stiller doing it.
My favorite scene with Ben Stiller in the movie is literally his first scene where he's talking to Ryan O'Neal about how great he is, and then it cuts to him talking to someone else in the diner, and he's just like, he's insane, I don't like him, and he's kind of just mad about his situation. That's the best scene with him, because we get to see his duality. We get to see the most character out of him in the entire movie, and then after that he kind of takes a sideshow.
Right. And you need to win with that. You need to keep that tempo up throughout the movie of their constant frustration, but you understand that Daryl's character has it. He already solved it before you even brought it to him. Yeah. Kind of a mentality. And that you just don't get that. And so that's why I'm saying what failed with this movie is kind of a greeny kind of a script. You didn't sell what we had. You kind of leafed off a David Fincher movie. You think it's going to be like David Fincher.
Yeah, which again, we understand that's not Jake Kasdan's fault. That's whoever's selling the movie's fault. But like, it didn't help.
And it has a very, I don't want to insult it. It has a very like a television episode feel to it.
Yeah, I think it might have been the right choice to actually aim it for television with that prequel series. Too bad it didn't get picked up. But
and of course, I think I'm kind of basing on that after this movie, a lot of things came onto television. It's obviously inspired like Monk and Psych and all that.
Yeah, kind of had that Zero Effect walked so that Monk could run. Kind of almost like how Eyes of Laura Mars is kind of a really messy kind of a movie. And we talked about how, well, it's a messy movie. If we didn't have Eyes of Laura Mars, we wouldn't have Halloween. We wouldn't have and branched off all these amazing things that came out of it. This film is kind of the same thing, where it's like, I like more of it than I dislike. It definitely has that greenness to it. And I'm someone who, I love a lot of Jake Kasdan stuff. I think his 2 Jumanji films are better than the original Jumanji. I think Walk Hard is one of the best comedies.
Well, you need to understand the content, right?
Yeah.
I think Jake needs somebody to launch pad it, and then he can refine it, rather for him to start from scratch.
Well, and I think too, it's a good idea to use the framework of a classic story. And classic characters, recognizable characters. This might have just been one of those situations where he was trying to make a really like frenetic and interesting first feature, and again, more of it worked than didn't.
Yes.
But I just think he's gotten so much better in the interim. Even some of the comedies he did this movie called Sex Tape with Cameron Diaz and Jason Segel, which was a movie that looked really stupid. I thought it was a really funny romantic comedy.
And that was sold the wrong way. It would look like it was going to be like almost a National Lampoon kind of a...
Yeah, and it actually plays it more of almost like a comedy thriller about a sex tape, which I think like Kasdan has that ability to like kind of play with genre tropes really well, and you can see the ideas starting here. It's just it's more polished later on. So a lot of credit to him. I think it's a solid debut,
especially when your dad's Lawrence Kasdan.
Yeah.
So I'm saying this is it's flawed, but it's heavily invested. If you like those TV shows that we cited, I think if you like, this is a breakout point for Ben Stiller. He would eventually in 1998 do a movie called Permanent Midnight, and that kind of launched his career.
Yeah.
But I think it's an interesting footnote of a movie that I understand why it kind of fell through the cracks. It's because the title, you couldn't find it for renting. It's not a theater kind of a movie kind of want to see. And it's kind of should have been for television.
It's one of those movies I actually think could do a legacy sequel really nicely.
Yeah.
Even if you wanted to do it on TV, because Pullman and Stiller have both done TV work recently too. So it's almost like one of those things you could springboard off. You know?
You know, AMC was looking for some good stuff still.
Yeah. So do that.
Or some Netflix kind of a thing.
Yeah, I think it's a good jumping off point. It's if you can convince me that whole mattress thing they talked about halfway through the movie is real when it's complete BS. You got some chops in the storytelling department, because I was like, I got to do research on that mattress thing.
Right. This
and
is
it's
before
all BS.
Google. I know. Yeah.
You know?
But if that's what you needed in the movie, it's kind of neurotic.
More of that. You know.
Of that, right.
Yeah, definitely. So overall, I like the movie. Didn't love it, but glad I saw it.
I think it's after seeing it after 30 years, I see why I did like it. It's because the character, you know, obviously outrageous characters, exaggerations.
Is this the first time you've seen it since '98?
Yeah.
Has it gone up, gone down, or stayed the exact same?
I think it's the exact same.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. And I just like, there's something that really should have, there's something missing that should have launched in the stratosphere of just being fun. And I think that's missing. The like, just have a lot more comedy to, you know, buddy cop team.
Yeah.
But,
give me more scenes with Pullman and Ryan O'Neal, actually, because they don't interact a ton in the film. But that scene where he's jogging next to him, I think is one of the best scenes in the movie.
He's matching it, right?
Because he's matching, and he also, it has a narrative purpose, but it's also funny and weird and quirky. Like, give me some more of that where he's like not really giving.
Right, you have a scene of Ryan O'Neal's character just doing something like maybe picking up the laundry at dry cleaning, and Bill Pullman standing there, and gets in his way, and something like that.
Yeah, use some more of those makeup disguises. Like it felt like Fletch at times. You know, where like we were just kept it being disguised for no reason at all.
Yes.
Give me like push it a little bit further, and that's why I think almost legacy sequel could be kind of fun. But it's just me.
So, have you seen the Zero Effect? Chances are you probably haven't.
Yeah, but it's available to rent or buy digitally on a number of platforms. So go ahead and give it a look, and then come on back and tell us what you thought about the film.
Please do.
And maybe give us your favorite Bill Pullman movie. It can be it can be Spaceballs. It can be Independence Day. Let us know. We'd love to hear about it. Don't forget to check out that Patreon link down below. We've got our recent episodes of The Road to De Palma, where we covered Scarface. We had our recent favorite films that should have been nominated for Oscars on our picks part of the channel. And you can also join the Patreon to tell us what to talk about next, which we'd love to have. Thank you guys for joining us. You can find all my film reviews over at goatfilmreviews.com.
And you can find my show, The St. Paul Filmcast, anywhere you find podcasts.
Thank you for joining us. Zero out.